Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Oh, okay. KrishnaLunch@gmail.com. Last name. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottama Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayam Ashtapresvaparishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhakti Bhakti Naistiki. Attendance and classes on Bhagavatam and rendering of service to the Spirit Brother. All that is troubles of the heart is almost completely destroyed. But none of the service of the personality of God, whose prayers were translated into songs, established as the Guru of Gopi. Okay. So, before we read any other verses, we just contextualize, remind ourselves where we are. Narada Muni has appeared, right? Appeared in front of who? One else? In front of Vyasadeva, yes. His disciple Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva was feeling despondent. Why was he feeling despondent? Right. He had a hint that maybe that's the reason, but he wasn't sure. But Narada then came and confirmed it. So Vyasadeva was trying to do a great service. He saw Kali Yuga approaching, and he knew that these Vedic texts are quite vast, quite complicated. He tried to compile it into something more accessible for the people of our time, of Kali Yuga. So, for one thing, he wrote the Vedanta Sutra, which is a commentary on all of the Vedas. But these sutra texts are very cryptic, difficult to understand, so it wasn't enough. So he also, it's explained in the verses we've read, he also compiled the Mahabharata, which is like a history of the land of Bharat, ancient India. And that he thought would be more accessible. It's very narrative style, very engaging. It's all about basically Krishna and the Pandavas, his friends, his cousins. So Vyasa was thinking this is very accessible, but still it didn't feel right. So Narada appeared and gave him the news that basically in these texts that you've written, you focus too much on what we call the 4 purusharthas, the 4 so-called goals of human life. What are those? Okay, yes, that's fine. Right? So that's kama. That's quite good. Moksha, liberation. Yeah. So it starts with dharma, which is like a more limited form of religion, you could say, more ritualistic. Dharma, and then comes artha, economic development. And then once you economically develop, then you can enjoy your senses, kama, and then eventually liberation. So Narada is pointing out that you focused a lot on these four things, but that can actually be a little bit of a trap for the conditioned souls to focus too much on those things. Right? Okay, so now let's see where it goes from here. So text 12 is where we're going to start. So we need to pull these up. It's not in this slide. I'll read the first one. Okay, so the conversation continues. Narada is still instructing Vyasadeva. He says in text 12, knowledge, so please listen carefully, give all your attention to the Bhagavatam. Knowledge of self-realization, even though free from all material affinity, does not look well if devoid of a conception of the infallible God. What then is the use of fruitive activities, which are naturally painful from the very beginning and transient by nature, if they are not utilized for the devotional service of the Lord? Could be number 13. Your vision is completely perfect. Your fame is spotless. You are firm in vow and situated in truthfulness. And thus, you can think of the pastimes of the Lord in trance, from the liberation of the people in general, for the liberation of the people in general from all material bondage. So I guess Narada is sprinkling some encouragement throughout while being, directing him and kind of critically pointing out what's wrong. He's also saying, you're qualified, you can do this. Anyone want to read number 14?
Whatever you desire to describe that is separate in vision from the Lord simply reacts with different forms, names, and results to agitate the mind, as the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place.
The people in general are naturally inclined to enjoy. You have encouraged them in that way in the name of religion. This is verily condemned and quite unreasonable. Because they are guided under your instructions, they will accept such activities in the name of religion and will hardly care for prohibitions.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting. So Vyasadeva was just Vedas, just like summarizing what was already there. But Narada's pointing out that because you haven't sufficiently spoken about God and service to God, now you've just kept everyone's focus on these fruitive activities, which basically are all about sense gratification and very entangling. So what's the use of that? Okay, let's continue. Next.
The Supreme Lord is unlimited. Only a very expert personality, retired from the activities of material happiness, deserves to understand this knowledge of spiritual values. Therefore, those who are not so well situated due to material attachment should be shown the ways of transcendental realization by your goodness through descriptions of the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord.
Let's go to the top of this one again, Nick. So this is kind of strange. The Supreme Lord is unlimited. Only a very expert personality retired from material happiness deserves to understand the knowledge of spiritual values. So we might misunderstand what's being said here, but what's being said is that traditionally, in the traditional Vedic systems, in order to access higher spiritual knowledge, there was a little bit of a barrier of entry, right? You have to be really renounced, giving up this, giving up that. It even says kind of retired, so you're older usually. But Narada is basically saying everyone should have access. You should present it in a way that pierces to the spiritual essence for everyone who comes in contact with it. Okay, number 17. I'll do 17. One who has, oh, by the way, listen extra carefully to this one, because 17 and 19 are very related to what we'll be speaking about today. One who has forsaken his material occupations to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage, yet there is no danger of his being unsuccessful. On the other hand, a non-devotee, though fully engaged in occupational duties, does not gain anything. We could do 18 for us. Right?
Persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should endeavor only for that purposeful end, which is not obtainable even by wandering from the topmost planet, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest planet, Patala. As far as happiness derived from sense enjoyment is concerned, it can be obtained automatically in course of time, just as in course of time we obtain miseries even though we do not desire them.
Okay, so two main things were said there. First of all, if you're intelligent, try and access this thing which is now given, but which usually you wouldn't find anywhere, even if you go from the highest planet, Brahmaloka, down to lower regions, Patala. Now this thing is here, it can be accessed. So if you're intelligent, this is what you'd go for. Instead of going for these ritualistic activities, which are all about maximizing your material happiness, minimizing your material unhappiness. But Narada is saying, this material happiness and unhappiness, it comes. Whatever you do doesn't really matter. It comes of its own accord. In one sense, what Narada is saying is that karma is so complicated that even though we try and go in one direction, when we get karmically implicated and entangled, it kind of takes us on a different course. That makes sense, right? So Narada is like building his case, you could say, for why Vyasadeva should write a new commentary focusing on bhakti, devotion to God and God's pastimes. Why this is better or more what's the word? Yeah, more you should seek this. It's more sought after than the traditional Vedic knowledge. Okay, one more verse.
My dear Vyas, even though a devotee of Lord Krishna sometimes falls down, somehow or other, he certainly does not undergo material existence like others, fruit of workers, etc. Because a person who has once relished the taste of the lotus feet of the Lord can do nothing but remember that ecstasy again and again.
So second verse now speaking about when you fall, really nothing is lost. Okay, now we can go to the slideshow. Yeah. So yes, Narada is telling him he focused on the wrong things. Too much on dharma, artha, kama, moksha, too much on religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Instead, you haven't sufficiently focused on the glorification of the Lord. And now Narada is starting to give reasons why you should rather write about bhakti. And what Narada is kind of doing, it's almost like he's speaking about an investment portfolio. Because, you can think of faith, whatever we place our faith in, is speaking volumes about what we want to invest in, right? Just bear with me for a second. Lots of souls are circling around here in these material universes, stuck in this cycle of samsara, birth and death, right? And it's basically because we don't have an interest in going back to Godhead. We don't have an interest in devotional service. We don't want to invest in that. We don't see that as valuable necessarily. Instead, we're investing in other things. We're getting distracted. So please tell me, what are some of this should be easy. What are some of the distractions? Yes.
Sports and politics.
Oh yeah, from the other day you also mentioned. Okay, Jackson. Food. Ooh. Well, that's a very prominent. That's a very important one. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the song that we often sing almost every morning. He says that the tongue is the most voracious of all the senses, and the senses are like a network of paths leading to death. It's entangling. It's karmically entangling what the tongue drives us towards. Very distracting in the grander scheme of things. Think of the journey of your soul and its karmic entanglements. Very distracting. What other distractions? Yes. That's funny. That's a nice euphemism. Any other thoughts? Maybe one or two more. It means beautiful people. Studies have shown that beauty has a lot to do with the symmetry of your face. That's what you meant, right? Yeah. Notifications. Oh my god. Okay, so many distractions, and what we're distracted by is basically showing how we're setting up our investment portfolio, what we're putting our time and energy into. And there's an ideology, there's a philosophy that dominates today. You know, we speak about it a lot in our morning classes. The YOLO, the you only live once. Basically, speaking of notifications, basically enjoy it now because soon it'll all be over. That's what people do, right? Now, are souls just stuck here in samsara during Kali Yuga? In like a time when Vedic culture is lost? Or was it there in other ages as well? In other ages as well, right? So what were people being distracted by back then? Well, they were actually being distracted by Vedic rituals. They were being distracted by the Vedas themselves. Isn't that funny? Now, we've spoken before in our classes that Krishna is so kind that he understands we have our free will and we will have many different desires. So instead of letting our desires just carry us wherever it may, he gives such a wide range of directions within the Vedic texts already for us to be, attracted to. So the Vedas themselves, ironically, can distract you from Krishna. Any ideas? I mean, maybe if you can access your past life, then you can remember. But any ideas? What kind of like Vedic rituals are there in Vedic times? Yes.
Animal sacrifice.
Okay, but we have to understand that very carefully. In Kali Yuga, animal sacrifice became a little twisted, and they actually sacrificed the animals to eat them. But in ancient times, the Brahmanas, they had mystic powers. They could chant mantras so that the animal, it walks into the fire, but it walks out the other side with a new young body. Yeah. So that's what animal sacrifices actually were in ancient Vedic times. But what was the purpose of them? Do you know, Jackson? Yeah. So, sorry? To test mantras, okay. Originally, it's meant as a form of worshiping Krishna, but you can do animal sacrifices for many different reasons. Kings can do it to increase their power, for your wealth, or whatever. Okay, we have some other hands. What are the Vedic rituals might there be?
Human sacrifice.
Oh my god! I don't know if that might be a little outside of the Vedic. It happened. So it happened even in other yugas, but I don't know if it was really within the Vedic scheme, the strict, instructions of the Vedic literatures. Yes, Stephen? Horse sacrifice. Horse sacrifice? Yeah, that's another.
But yeah, I mean, this is like more specific of the animal sacrifices. I think kings would do this to like attain. You'd have to do it like 100 times or something, a really elaborate horse sacrifice, and then you would get like a celestial position.
Right. And even Maharaj Yudhishthir did it, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. Yeah. I think the horse also went into the fire. Maybe the horse did a tour first, and then at the end they give it a new body. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little reenactment. Would anyone want to do it with me? Nate? Okay, so we're in ancient Vedic times, and I'm gonna ask you if you've done things, and all you have to do is say no. Like you can say whatever reason you want, but or don't give a reason actually. Just say no, I couldn't do it. Couldn't fit in. Okay, so I rock up at Nate's little, I don't know, wooden hut or something. We're in a Vedic village. I'm like, Nate, have you performed your morning rituals yet?
No, not yet.
Oh my Krishna, look at this guy. This guy's crazy. What? You haven't done it yet?
No, I'm getting to it. It's on the list.
Whoa, that's risky, Prabhu. Like, what about your next life?
What about this
Wow.
life?
Okay, so now tell me the reason is because you're focusing more just on your bhakti practice.
I'm just paying more attention to my bhakti practice.
Okay, that's all good and well, but you know, I've seen that sometimes these bhakti yogis they fall down. They fall down. What then? What's gonna happen? You're not thinking about your karma. Why are these Vedic rituals there? It's in our scriptures. Are you not reading? So anyway, this is just a little silly reenactment. But in my opinion, I didn't read this in any of the commentaries, but I think just logically we can infer. Narada is speaking about why bhakti yoga is not risky, kind of implying that people might think it is risky, right? Because they think you have to be doing this, this, and this if you want to care about your future, or if you want to be responsible, right? Okay, so people saw these ritualistic activities as extremely important, and they thought that they were investing in their future, and that neglecting it in any way was very risky. But now Narada comes on the scene, and as a bhakti yogi, he's saying that actually, no, if you ignore your bhakti, that's what's risky. And focusing only on these different ritualistic processes, that's what's really risky. So I've used this example before of snakes and ladders. Do you all know this game? Does anyone not know this game? Shoots and ladders? Okay, so you roll a dice and you hope you land on the ladder so you can go up and up. Sometimes you land on the mouth of the snake and then you're going to slide back down. So I've always thought that this game is a really good representation of what these Vedic ritualistic processes are like. Why do I say that? So basically you're rolling the dice, it's risky. Why do I say that? So the reason is these processes, ritualistic processes, you don't really gain control of your heart and your deeper desires. So you might be doing some process that'll, is said to guarantee you access to the higher planets. You can have like a heavenly demigod body in existence. But they're not going to the root cause of why you're here in this material world in the first place, why you have certain desires that are not good for you. So, you're aiming your karma upwards, but your heart is actually just continually drifting downwards, downwards, downwards. And in the long run, wherever the heart's going is where you will go. Even though temporarily you might go up and down. If the heart keeps drifting down and down and down. So these rituals do nothing to purify your heart. So I want to ask you, can any of you think, you don't have to give us the graphic details, but before you started practicing, are there any things you did which, when you think about it now, you're like, oh my gosh, how did that even happen? Anyone like that? Your hands, the honest ones. So when you think back on that, how is that possible? It's about your state of consciousness. It's about the heart and what lies deep within the heart, right? So here's another funny analogy getting back to the investment portfolios. I have a little AI generated image here. So imagine someone is sitting, they're so focused on their investment portfolio, but they're like on the edge of a cliff very precariously balanced. At any moment, they can fall. And then what's the use of all those investments? So similar thing here. You might focus on all these ritualistic activities, but your heart is still drifting downwards. So there's impending doom, right? So that's why Narada is saying, okay, fine, you want to do these little investments, but look at the main investment, just like take care of your soul, right? Okay. So in verse 17, one who has forsaken his material occupations to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage, yet there is no danger. So again, Narada is saying, this is what's safe. And on the other hand, a non-devotee might be fully engaged in his occupational duties, but he doesn't gain anything. Very strong words. Here's another comparison or analogy for you. Anyone know what this refers to? Have you heard of some spiritual lesson based on this? Continue on, share this.
It's like the analogy of the elephant that takes a bath and cleans himself like really, really nicely all over, and then as soon as he get out of the bath, he starts rolling himself into sand.
Right. And what does it symbolize?
Or so.
So basically, you can use some of these Vedic rituals to clear yourself of bad karma. Okay? So it's like so basically, it's compared to people who go to holy places to take a dip in the Ganga because they want to be washed of their sins. But at the same time, they're not working on their bhakti. So it's not getting to the root cause of the problem, the reason why you're incurring these debts, why you're building up bad karma, the very reason the root cause is not addressed. You just do a ritual to temporarily get relief or get rid of some of that bad karma. So you might as well take a bath and then immediately you go back to whatever generated that bad karma. So immediately you throw dirt on yourself. Okay? But not only that, we've been speaking about what you do to yourself. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Not only that, but you're implicating others, right? Do you think sometimes about energetically how we're influencing each other? Even if you don't say anything, just your lifestyle alone is making other people act a certain way. We all, whether you like it or not, we're here together and we're influencing each other, right? So it's like you're walking around tying chains around other people, not just yourself. You're basically telling others how to invest, if we can go with an investment analogy. You're giving investment advice when you really shouldn't be doing so. What's that disclaimer they always say? Not a, what did they say? Or they just, when someone says something in a video or something, I'm not a legal professional. I'm not a financial, this is not financial advice. But we go around giving financial advice all the time. What's a big example of how we implicate others?
I don't think it's a big one, but like you're like, hey, like to John, like, hey, let's go to the concert. You just sneak out, it's implicated.
That's good example. There's one I'm thinking of. There's one thing I'm thinking of that's very, very implicating. Think you have something? I'll get to mine if it's not the same.
I don't think it's your speak. The one I was thinking about is really simple. It's just when you see somebody do something, it sparks a desire for you to do the same. So if they're doing something that's not good for your spiritual life, then you feel inclined to do it too.
Right. Good. So what I was thinking about is relationships. Okay, so if there's no Krishna in the center of your relationship, then by default, you're putting yourself as the center of the other person's world. You're basically saying, yes, I could be the recipient of all your energy, attention, love. And is that true? Is that true? Like, let's think about protection, for example. like I'm a husband, and it's like there's some masculinity there, there's some masculine role. I feel like I need to protect my partner. But as a devotee, I should know that ultimately I can offer some little bit of protection, but not that much. I'm not omniscient, I'm not omnipresent, I'm not all powerful. So it's very risky, it's very implicating. And we put chains around each other. Okay. So just a quick summary for where we are now. Narada is instructing Vyas. He's saying you focus too much on these ritualistic things. These rituals are a distraction. You have to speak about bhakti. You have to help people's hearts become elevated instead of drifting down, right? And people become entangled if they just focus on these ritualistic things, and they entangle each other. Now, have you heard about something? So now we're going to speak about the bhakti yogis. Have you heard about how it's said that for the bhakti yogi, Krishna takes personal charge of their karma? There's actually a phrase, Krishna karma. You've heard about that? I want to hear your thoughts. Doesn't that sound a little bit unfair? Christina, nuts. Why did the bhakti yogis get special treatment? Because when Krishna karma is there, when Krishna takes personal charge, we also hear that he lessens the karma a little bit. That's unfair. Thoughts?
Maybe that's just part of the return in your Krishna investment portfolio.
Okay, good point. Good point. So you're getting a return on investment there? Yes. Yeah.
Krishna lessons are common. How do we not have a transactional relationship with this?
Ooh, very interesting. That's a very good question. So Nate asks, if we know that when we approach Krishna, our karma will be lessened, how do we know we're not just going to approach Krishna with that motivation? Well, Krishna is not a fool, and you can't trick Krishna. So when you try and do that, I don't think it's going to work out as you think it will. I'll just say that. But I think you're still approaching Krishna, even if you're doing that. So Krishna's happy about whoever approaches him. Okay, I have to move on. I have a 15 to get through, so sorry, Stephen. Can't take your hand now. So another reason you could say why there's this so-called favoritism is because the bhakti yogi, we spoke about karma kandi, their soul or their heart and their desires just drifting downwards. The bhakti yogi, their heart is going upwards, right? And it's funny because it might seem opposite. A karma kandi might externally be doing everything right, but internally their heart is not going in the right direction. And with the bhakti yogi, it can be the opposite. Externally, it might seem like we're struggling. Oh, I still want to go to the concerts. I want to play some video games. I want to just lie in a comatose state and watch YouTube videos for, who knows, 2 hours, 3 hours. So it might feel like externally we're struggling. But it's a fact that our heart is becoming purified and it's drifting upwards in a steady direction towards the spiritual world, right? We can see that our heart is changing. Like I was thinking, as an example, I don't want to harm living beings. As I was very callous, very thoughtless about it before my bhakti yoga. Killing insects, killing whatever. Of course, our diets also. So that's a good example. I mean, you can tell me honestly, are you just being more nonviolent now because you're being told so, or is it because your heart is changing? Does anyone feel that? Your heart is becoming softer, right? And then not only all of that, but just as we said with the karmikandi, they're influencing others. So the devotee is also influencing others, but in the opposite direction. Instead of putting chains around everyone, now Krishna's helping you help everyone else, and you have a key, and you're unlocking those chains. When someone sees you, we talked about how we influence each other, no matter if you say something or not, just your lifestyle. So people are seeing that you're living in a way that you want to get closer to Krishna, get out of this material world. That has a profound effect. Don't underestimate it, right? Karma is described as a web sometimes, and bhakti is described as fire. So you're all on fire. What happens if you put fire on a spider's web? Has anyone ever seen that? It disappears in like 0.1 seconds. Right? So as bhakti yogis, we have this amazing opportunity to just burn karma, not just for ourselves, but for others. So our hearts are melting, our lessons are being learned. So that's why Krishna karma comes in. Krishna takes personal charge. You don't have to learn those lessons in such a harsh karmic way. You don't have to get that exact karmic load anymore because you're already making the progress. And that's why Narada is saying you can abandon this fruit of work because your future is secure. Now, is it okay? So listen to this statement: abandon the fruit of work and don't worry, your future is secure. Is there any instance where we hear some statement like this? We've heard it from Narada. Does anyone else say something like that? Yes.
Krishna and Bhagavad Gita.
Okay. Do you know the verse? Can you give like a English paraphrased?
It says, surrender all separate dharmas. Surely you will come to me.
Almost. So, anyone know the Sanskrit? You want to chant it with me? Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam saranam praja aham tvam sarva papabhyo moksha yeshyami ma suchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So can you see how this is exactly what Narada is speaking about in this chapter? Okay. There's many other examples. I don't think we have the time to go through them now. But so this is from the Bhagavad Gita. There's a very similar thing to the Bhagavad Gita, which is called the Uddhava Gita, when Krishna is speaking to Uddhava. It's in the Bhagavatam, the 11th canto. And Krishna is saying very similar things there. Krishna even says at one point that you're not indebted anymore to your ancestors, to the demigods, to this, to that. Because karma is very complicated, as we've said. And did you know that you're actually indebted just upon being born? You owe a debt to your parents and to their parents. And the demigods are actually helping you even just lift your arm. Did you know that there's demigods in control of your bodily movements? And then you can't do that without the demigods' help? So you're indebted in so many different ways. But Krishna is saying, you don't have to care about those things anymore if you serve me, because he's the root of the plant, you know? You don't water the leaves. You just put the water straight in the root. But now, there can be some misconceptions. Ooh, nice, I can abandon all my duties. Ooh, that sounds really tantalizing. I've had a few conversations with different devotees over the years who they were just so happy that they could give up their studies and move into the temple. Sometimes devotees do that, and it's fine, because that wasn't maybe not the direction they should go in. But in most cases, someone who's studying and then comes to bhakti, it's probably best for them to keep studying. Another really bad example of this tendency, Adishan was telling me that he's seen in Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Eastern European countries. Sometimes there are young devotee couples who have kids, and then they don't provide the basic needs of the kids, and then they have this kind of pseudo philosophy of Krishna's in control. So there's this tendency that you don't have to, fulfill your mundane duties anymore. So we have to be very careful. If Krishna is saying abandon all varieties of religion, all duties, or all dharmas, I think there's a very specific meaning to the word abandon. Because also in other places, Krishna says, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, it's better for you to imperfectly fulfill your own occupation or duties than to perfectly follow someone else's dharma. So this is contradictory. Krishna's saying abandon it, but he's also saying you better stick to it even if you do it imperfectly. What's going on? Any thoughts? How are we gonna solve the mystery? Yes, Steven.
Is that this verse from chapter 18 is kind of like it's like the ultimate goal. It's like if you can just abandon
Yes.
everything and just surrender unto me, then that's great. Then I'll protect you, no problem.
Yes,
But-
that's one explanation. Very good. Like it's about our level of advancement, right? That's one explanation, and we have to understand it like that. But there's another way of understanding that. That means you abandon activity to me and admit.
It's like the mind is still attached to this. But if you're doing something but you're thinking about Krishna instead,
Exactly.
it's like, and it doesn't really, you could be doing anything.
Exactly.
If
Safest, most risk-free path is that of bhakti yoga. But we might wonder, how can that be? Because we've mentioned sometimes we see someone stops practicing. Maybe some of you have some friends. If you've been practicing for long enough, you might have had some people who were practicing with you at one. Giving us that assuredness, assurity. He's saying, if the impression are some body. The subtle body is that thing which you carry to the next life. It goes on and carries impressions with it. So the impressions made upon subtle body by forever. And Prabhupada also spoke about a spiritual bank balance, saying all the services that we're doing, they go into your spiritual bank balance and they stay there. So how is this? Why is it indestructible? What makes it indestructible? So is it possible to go to verse 19? And I want to look at the word for word for verse 19. Actually, it's not necessary. Sorry. I'll just speak about it. There's these two Sanskrit words in verse 19. It said rasa graha, right? Because it was speaking about how once someone tastes these bhakti mellows, they don't want to give it up. That means that's rasa graha. So graha means different things. Sanskrit is a complicated language. Again, this thing is not working. You can click for me, Nate. Let's just go to the next one. Graha means to grab or to seize. That's one meaning. The planets in Vedic culture is also called graha because why? They have intense magnetism, gravity, right? The planets pull things towards them. So grahi. Graha means you're pulling something. So rasa graha means you're trying to see. And we don't have full access to it, and it kind of comes and goes, but we're haunted by it. We just want to keep pursuing it. And that's the way in which these impressions are indestructible, because they wake up the soul. That transcendental taste is addictive. That's what you've been waiting for a long, long time. And that's what the Bhagavatam is. Nate was asking Shamala Kishori, why the Bhagavatam? Is the Mahabharata not enough? Why did he write the Mahabharata? And she gave a great answer. She said the Bhagavatam is the next level, the next step. And it's actually showing these different relationships Krishna has with his devotees and the amazing transcendental mellows that exist there. So some examples, you can go to the next one. You can go 2, because we're skipping over some slides. So there's so many exchanges. Krishna sharing prasadam with his friends, and they're sharing it with him. You can keep going, Nate. One of my favorites, Sudama Brahmana, one of Krishna's old school friends, who was a very poor Brahmana, and he visited Krishna in Dwarka once when Krishna was a king after his Vrindavan pastimes. Krishna was very rich. So there's a whole story. We won't go into the details, but when in one sense, he did it because it's not a weapon that he picked up. He picked up a chariot wheel from a broken chariot nearby. People made fun of him because they knew he was illiterate, but yet he wrote the Bhagavad Gita. So he went to him and asked, "What is going on? Why? I know that you're illiterate, or you're experiencing something." The